Next up, we have Matthew Ramirez from MIMAS.
So let me take you back to the 5th century BC with the words of the Chinese philosopher, teacher, and politician Confucius. I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. Yes, I get the irony. I'm delivering to you in exactly the same way that he advised against. But the act of doing, it allows for embedding the learning in the context of the learner's life. And I think this is really important when we talk about critically reflecting on the learning and the process. So if we go to, this slide is from Bologna University, one of the first universities out of Italy in the 14th century. And have they heeded the advice of Confucius? No, they've not. If you ever needed evidence that lectures were not the best delivery mechanism for learning, it's all in that slide here. And I don't know if it's deliberate in any way, but you can see in the back row, you've got people that are, their attention's wavering. They're talking. In fact, can you find that many people that are actually looking at the person at the front of the class? In fact, there's a person falling asleep, and this is before disruptive technology such as Facebook. So the fact that they're not even paying attention says it all. So if we go forward to modern day, not much has changed. In fact, the only thing that has changed was the class sizes. Whereas in the 14th century there was tens of people, there's now hundreds of people that are focusing on this sole delivery at the front of the classroom. So research from the University of Washington in STEM-based subject areas has shown across 225 studies that you're more than 1.5 times likely to fail a subject if you deliver it in this didactic way, so you have it in a lecture-based environment. And this is in contrast to so-called active learning when the participants are a part of the learning experience. And if I go to an everyday piece of learning that most of us have to go through, a driving test, you would never dream of undertaking a driving test having never practiced. And this is where I see that AR can really make a difference, because it can be a tool to inspire, to engage, and more importantly, turn students into active participants. Of course, I'm being a bit flippant when it comes to lecture-based learning. It has its value, but I think if that's the only method of delivery that you're using, then your teaching is flawed. So what are the benefits of augmented reality? Well, in a lot of subject areas, they exist within staid environments. The traditional methods are quite abstract. They're not very visual. And for visual learners, it's not really easy to learn in that way. It's great for physical learning spaces such as clinical skills labs, engineering workshops, and that we can move towards this connected world idea where all the objects in those arenas are linked together. And it's especially good with blended learning methodology. So you might well think and consider that lectures are a valuable way of delivering learning, but augmented reality is really good at blending those different learning methods together, so it's more active-based. And the other good thing about it is that it bridges the gap between your specialist demonstrating a piece of equipment, maybe in a clinical skills lab, a technique, applying a cannula, with independent learning. So there is that active process that the student's involved in. So we've worked, one of our first implementations was with medieval Italian students in a project called Scarlet. And I think whenever you're looking at augmented reality in education, you have to look at when is it appropriate to use augmented reality. and the reasons are necessary that the current technology falls short of solving. If you're just replicating what already exists, students will soon fall back and go back to traditional environments. So the way that we used augmented reality was object-based tracking. It would surround the illustrated trackers with information or academic commentaries, and the students really valued that because it was coming from a trusted source. So they found that the technology were easy to use. These are non-technical students. They'd all consider themselves to be quite Luddites in their outlook to technology. So they found it very easy to use. And they enjoyed the fact that it put them in the situation and it made the learning interactive. And they were inspired by using it in this way. So the negatives, well, because they were viewing the primary resources, the manuscripts, the medieval documents with the secondary information, sometimes they didn't like that disconnect. They felt divorced from the physical object. And the activity was prescribed, so it was very linear. So it's not always appropriate for students to work in that way. They may have different learning styles that aren't embraced by active-based learning and visual learning. So in terms of the lessons learned, I think the most important that I can take from this is that the technology should be transparent. And we heard before with one of the keynotes about the experience should be natural. They shouldn't even think about it as being an add-on or bolted on to an existing way of delivery. The second introduction to augmented reality was implemented within data visualization for geospatial datasets, which in their part are very large. And the challenge in this case was it was very hard to effectively visualize textual, what were effectively textual data in a palatable way for the students to digest. And the other side of it was we had a science fair for secondary school students, and it was a great way of recruiting students for failing courses. A third implementation, so the challenge with this was that part-time students and distance learners that couldn't engage in field trips where academics would lead a set of students around North England countryside, we wanted to make sure that they replicated the same learning experience that full-time students had. So we surrounded using location-based experience with audio at certain points. We had a compass and a dynamic navigation built in so that when the commentary referred to a certain direction, they were able to look at the environment in different ways. We're also working in the healthcare environment with our dentistry faculty. And one of the challenges that we had was that students were given iPads within the university without any directed content. So this is what we sought to overcome using augmented reality. So in this example, it's using visual cues on a printed piece of paper with dental conditions, and by the act of clicking on the different teeth, it brings up information about that physical condition. We worked in the clinical skills labs with 3D object recognition. This is a cannula, and we went through the process of reinforcing the learning for practical-based examinations. So it would walk you through the process of applying a cannula. And one of our current projects, we're working with a music college in Leeds. And one of the challenges here is that students have all this industry standards equipment in recording studios, but they don't have that guidance from the professionals. So we're using 3D-based tracking to overlay information onto the music systems. And there are some of our other implementations, including museums and primary school education. I just want to conclude with this quote from Einstein. And I think we in education have a unique opportunity, and I'd go beyond that to say a moral obligation, to not educate with a one-size-fits-all mentality. And I posit to you that using more engaging augmented reality solutions can move towards achieving this within an educational environment. Thank you for your time.